I'm Pam, and I would like to welcome you to the Live Authentically show. My team and I help other people step into their authentic realities, and we do this a number of different ways. This show is obviously one of them, and we also have a Facebook group. And I also have my debut book out there, SOAR, SOAR, and it's an experiential spiritual journey through my divorce process and showed how I partnered with the universe to create my new reality. I'm also super excited that we're going to be announcing some really exciting changes here at Live Authentically. We're always looking to adapt to what our clients need, and super excited to announce some changes soon. So on my show today, I have with me Adam Hergenrother. Hey, Adam.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm super excited to be here and just wanted to thank you for all the time and energy you put into getting people to live authentically. I know how much time and energy goes into it. So I just want to say thank you for all the work you're doing.
Oh, you are too kind. Thank you. And I'm super excited to have you on my show this morning. And I know you're making a huge impact in the world as well. And I'm excited to hear how you do that. But before we get into all of that, I'd like to start the show off with the same question that I ask all of my guests. And that is, how do you live authentically every day?
Well, I think there's nobody better at being you than you. And so I think that goes with just about every single thing that you do. There's not one diet that works for every single person. It's about what works for you. There's not one exercise program. There's not one spiritual practice. There's not one meditation, right? And so it's really understanding who you are and what's really going to work for you. So the first thing that I always do to live authentically is giving myself permission that I am perfectly not perfect, meaning that I am perfectly accepting that I am not perfect and I'm not going to be perfect, because the human experience is perfect. But the reality is I'm not, you're not, nobody's ever going to be perfect. So there's nobody going to be better at being me than me and being you than you. So living authentically really ultimately means just aligning yourself with who it is that you truly are beyond the egoic level of consciousness and really beyond the mind chatter. Because most of the people, when they're listening to this conversation, will actually, I always ask the question, are you really listening to this conversation, or are you listening to the mind narrate this conversation? And so I think when you ask like living authentically, it's beyond just what you do in world. It's actually what experience you're actually having in life. And to me, living truly authentically means having the experience of tasting life directly, which means removing yourself from the conscious velcroing of the mind.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. Thank you. Well said. I want to talk a little bit about this whole idea of imperfection, right? Showing up,
Yeah.
we're all perfectly imperfect. So I'm curious, in what ways do you integrate and accept this whole idea of imperfection in your life, and how do you embody it and really display it and show it to others?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally in everything I do, right? It's like, being a parent is really hard. It's really hard. And I screw up being a parent all the time. I have three kids under 10. It's a lot. And the other day I just looked at my wife and I was like, it's okay. Parenting is really hard. I could tell she just needed to hear that because it's one of those moments, and it is. And you're never going to be a perfect parent. So I think if we have this pressure that we kind of walk around with, and the majority of us, that we need to hold ourselves to some standard outside of ourselves, not the standard that we've adjusted to, but to somebody else. Like, I need to be this perfect mother. I need to be able to do this. I need perfect business, but I need to have it all together. And the reality is you don't. And so for me, I kind of wake up and go, all right, well, I'm not going to be perfect here. We've got a very large organization. We have 800 plus people in my world, and I make mistakes every single day. And, you learn from them. They sometimes it can be costly, and you try not to make the same mistake. But in business, you're going to make mistakes. In exercise, in food, right? I'm never going to be perfect. I don't want to have the perfect diet, right? I want to eat, what I loved eating 85 to 90% plant-based. And then sometimes I love having chicken wings and pizza, right? Every week. So it's just like, I don't want to have these standards on me that have been placed from others, or ingested other people's answers because they're comfortable for you, and instead really living this imperfect life that you're never going to be perfect. And it actually gives you some kind of laughter to your life. It gives you some sense of, all right, well, if I'm already perfect just being here, then anything else really kind of doesn't matter, right? The world's just gonna unfold. It's gonna do its thing, right? It's never gonna unfold for 7 billion people the way people want it to. The poor world is just doing its thing. It's just unfolding. And so it's you getting to experience the unfolding of what's happening for you and then interacting with it the best that you can. And when the interaction of that moment that you're in with life is never going to be perfect in the way that you want it to, but it's going to be perfect because it's actually unfolding for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you said unfolding for you, because that's a belief. And I think a big part of this journey, I know at least it was for me, was really getting crystal clear on what are my beliefs. And ever
Yeah.
since I shifted into this whole idea that life is unfolding for me, life is always rigged in my favor. The universe always has
Yeah.
my back, regardless of what's going on around me. Everything really starts to shift and you start to see the world through new lenses. You start to welcome adversity in ways that you hadn't
Yes.
before and
Yeah.
realize that every experience that's bestowed upon us is really for the purposes of our evolution, our transformation, and our growth.
Yeah, that's I love how you said that. There's a natural gradient to things, right? There's water follows the natural level of gradient, which is to always go downhill. The thing is, if water's always flowing downhill, it doesn't mean you can't, put a bucket and grab it and carry it uphill. It just takes a tremendous amount more energy. When you actually just understand that the water is gonna navigate and go through different circles, it's gonna get dammed up at times. It's all gonna lead back to the same source. Even if you end up picking up the bucket of water and bringing it uphill and you just leave it in the bucket, at some point it'll evaporate, come back down, and end up in the same source. So you're always gonna go there. So why not just allow yourself to ride the wave of the natural gradient of things the first time instead of allowing it to happen multiple times or multiple lives? You actually have to come back and actually do that because it's going to end up in the same source anyways. So once you learn to just let go of the rope of trying to pick up the water and you flow with it, life actually doesn't mean life becomes easy. It just becomes easier to be able to deal with life. And so therefore you're not caught up in this fight, because what is stress is resisting what is. And most people stress because they're resisting life. And so if you just actually flow with it, it doesn't mean you don't change the life situation. It doesn't mean you don't have goals. It doesn't mean you can't have things. And it doesn't mean any of that. It's actually, that's the point. It's not any of that. What it is just this natural flow, this natural gradient, and life knows way more about that than you do. That's for sure. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And right. And when we fight it, when we resist, then we hold ourselves in a place of suffering, right?
That's
Because
exact. Yeah.
we're always working against what is. But then
Yeah.
when we accept, when we integrate, when we flow with it, then that's when life becomes easier and there's an ease and an organicness and life is more, fun and
Yes.
more joyous and more humorous, et cetera. And then we can just learn to relax.
I think one clarifying thing on that, which I'm glad you brought up, is that people think that when you start following that natural gradient, that life should be easy for you. And it's not necessarily that, again, just to kind of make this point, doesn't mean that life just starts giving you everything, but it does in a way. If you actually get out of the way, it may not feel like it's unfolding exactly for you. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be challenges that show up in your life, but you deal with those challenges easier. A parking spot opens up, somebody comes into your life easier, right before you don't know it. Like, just the way of things actually starts to unfold. It doesn't mean there's not going to be challenges. I think some people hear that and they start going down this path and they're like, no, this person just quit, right? And see, this is happening again, right? And I hear that conversation in business sometimes. And it's like, well, if you just went with that, right, instead of resisting it, it's like maybe that person quitting was a great blessing for organization because it made room for somebody else to come in that took your business to a whole different level. And so it doesn't mean that things aren't going to happen. It just means when they happen, you surrender to the moment, right? You accept the moment. You can always accept what is. It doesn't mean you have to be happy with it. It doesn't mean you keep it, but if you accept it, then that's kind of that first modality. Then from there, you can actually move on to solving the life situation with much more ease and grace and speed.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well said. And yeah, just surrendering, right? Just surrendering and learning to flow with it is just such a game changer.
It
So,
really is. Yeah.
um, where I'd like to go next, so many different places I want to go, but
Right.
I do want to talk about, I know you've done an amazing job building your billion-dollar empire in a very short period of time. But I believe that one of the main reasons you've been able to do that is that you were really able to harness and tap into your own self-worth. And I
Yeah.
know that grappling with this whole idea of self-worth is a big part of your story. And I firmly believe that value comes from within. The more we invest in ourselves, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, the higher our vibration is, the more, organic experiences we attract. Again, that's how we get into that
Yeah.
state of surrender and ease and flow. Like that's not an
Yeah.
accident that this happens to some
Yeah.
people and doesn't happen to others. I mean, we have to do the work from the inside out. Value comes from within, and we attract based on, the energy we put out, the
Yes.
signal that we're broadcasting. So I'd love to hear about your journey from that kind of
Yeah.
rock bottom moment, if you
Yeah.
will, of rebuilding yourself and finding value from within to where you are today.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, there's two kind of moments. The first one was when I was about a freshman in high school. I was about 100 pounds overweight. I was in the drugs and kind of failing classes, kind of that role model student that you probably want your kid to hang out with during that time, right? And I came home one day and it'd been building up. I can't say it hadn't been, but it'd been building up. And I finally just came home and just started crying. And I wasn't sure, why I was feeling this. I just knew that there was something that I wasn't meant to do this. I wasn't meant to be on this path. And of course, my dad walked in, and this fatherly love that he is, and he's like, it was like midnight, and he heard me crying in a school night, and he's like, well, you have two choices. You can do something about it or accept it. And he just walked out of the room. I was like, oh, that's great, right? And really, the reality is I wanted to do something about it, and I didn't know how to do it. So I started with a lot of affirmations at the time as a freshman. I ended up losing 100 pounds that year, and then kind of really turned my life around. But then fast forward about 10 years after, that was about 15, 16, about 26, 27 years old. I had this, like a lot of people in business, I got into business for, I would say, power, legacy, fame, money, right? A lot of those things that a lot of us get into, if we're honest, or at least for me, that's what I did. And I had this goal of making about $500,000 in income. And right around that 26, 27, I did. And I remember sitting at a dinner table with my mom. It's just her and I. And my mom's the most unassuming person, could care less about how much money anybody has. And I kind of told her this goal. I was like, hey, I got to this number, and and I was like, isn't that great? And she's like, yeah, we'll pass the ketchup. And she like moved on in the whole conversation. In that moment, I realized that people just don't care. Right. And like, in fact, it wasn't that people don't care, is that this feeling that I was expected to come in after I hit this certain goal didn't show up anywhere. And I actually felt worse. And so at that point in my life, I said, well, what is the point of all of this? Kind of asking the same question I did about 10, 11 years earlier. And I realized that it was not about anything external. Those are all wonderful perks in life, but it had nothing to do with anything. And I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life trying to rearrange people, places, and things in the external world to change a problem that's inside. It's like trying to go to a rock and getting water out of it. It's just not going to work. It's not that it's wrong. It just doesn't work. And so at that moment, and it's not like it switched, but in that moment, I decided to make my life about an inward journey and about really focusing on me. And what's really fascinating in business, and I know you talk about this a lot, in business, my world actually exploded in a really good way the minute I started making it about my inner journey, which really worked on me and my energy and how I showed up with my own energy, really owning that and doing a lot of really deep work. And for me, it started with transcendental meditation about 15 years ago. It was kind of the gateway drug, if you will, into kind of the spiritual world for me, and really embracing that whole concept of really doing that inner deep work and massive releases. And so I've been on that kind of journey for the last 15 or so years. And what's wonderful is not only does your organization grow, but you just have a lot more lightness in your step. And so that when things don't go well or don't go the way they want them to, you don't suffer for weeks. It doesn't, people ask me sometimes, they're like, hey, when that happens to you, if, losing money feels different than making money. And like, when you do that, how does it feel? And it's like, well, it's not that you don't feel the emotion. I still feel it. It's just, it's only there for a couple seconds and it's gone. Right. That's the difference. People think that once you hit certain states or do the personal growth or spiritual growth, whatever word makes sense for you, is that it goes away. No, the difference is if somebody punches you in the face, you're going to feel it. You're not going to relive it over and over again in your mind. The same thing when events unfold in business doesn't mean that you don't like, oh, that person's leaving. That kind of hurts. It's just, you allow that energy to move through you like a cloud moves through the sky. And as you do that in business, it actually makes you it makes you a very strong competitor, because you're releasing the ego that's going to prevent you from making poor decisions, which is what leadership is about, making decisions every single day. 3 world-class decisions is what leaders should make every single day. So it prevents you from making poor quality decisions in everything and making higher quality decisions. And that's how organizations grow rapidly, is building a business, it's nobody's any different. It's just they made a 10% better decision every single day. And you compound that over time by being more in tune with the natural gradient and flow of things versus more in tune to what the egoic level of consciousness wants, and making decisions from that place. When you can make decisions more centered with more clarity, that's when the organization itself is that interaction with that right action, the right moment is what propels it. And that's been my journey. And that's what we're really focused on now.
Yeah, I love that. And as you're talking, the word that keeps coming up for me is just unconditional. When you do the
Yeah.
work from the inside out, and you focus
Yeah.
on the inner journey, you can live in this place of unconditionality. You show up rather than the conditional reality where we're constantly reacting to things around us. Well, like, good luck having an amazing day every single
Exactly.
day. You're dependent
Exactly.
on what's going on around you. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, you choose how you want to feel first, that unconditional reality,
Yes.
staying grounded, centered, anchored on who you are, your personal values, how you want to feel. And
Yeah.
then that's when you said that, we all experience those few moments of frustration. And I know I did just yesterday. We were just having some annoying tech issues, nobody,
Yeah.
just like stuff just getting in the way, and it was
Yeah.
just interrupting my momentum. But, I had to make a choice, but I only stayed in that energy for just a little bit and then got back into
Yeah.
my high vibes, my high flying disc, etc. And so we know how to, you adapt a different narrative. You have a different toolkit to get back to that place. And I believe that, though, that clarity, or I'm sorry, not clarity, that contrast serves us, right? Because we wouldn't fully appreciate, momentum if we didn't have those periods of
Mhm.
like frustration, right? We wouldn't fully appreciate success unless we had those, failures along the way. So I think that contrast is there to serve us. And then
Yeah.
that often, if we reframe or if we process it in the right way, then that can actually add fuel to our fire. That can add, more momentum to our mission, because we say, you know what, I really don't like how I feel when I'm a couple pounds heavier than my ideal weight, right? So now I know how that feels. I don't like when my clothes feel tight, and I'm not showing up as my best self. So therefore, that's what's going to propel me and help me stay super focused. Keep me counting my calories, eating intuitively, whatever it is that we need to do to stay dialed into feeling what we need to do to feel really amazing.
I don't know. I love that. I don't know how you feel about this. I like to think of it as, you know, you kind of mentioned as contrast. I think of it as like just everything's an experience and every experience feels different. And it's only the mind that actually starts to narrate which experience they like and don't like. And so contrast is what makes the world unique and what makes you have this human experience. If you didn't have a heart to be able to get low or to get really high, you wouldn't feel the whole depth of life. And so I always look at it as yes, a rattlesnake experience is different than a butterfly experience, but you're still a greater human, you're a greater being for having both those experiences. And so I try to bring a lot of consciousness and awareness to, am I judging the experience based on a preset of beliefs, or am I actually experiencing it? And when I find the most time when I start suffering or get caught up into that, it's that I'm actually judging the event that's already unfolded. I can't do anything about it. It's already done, right? It's happened. And I find myself judging the event instead of just experiencing the event, the occurrence of it, and then figuring out what actions you take from it. And so I always look at like, how do I want to play checkmate with life? Which is that I love how you said, how do I want to feel? It's a question every morning when I get up. Before I even meditate, the first question I always ask is, how do I want to feel today? And the answer is, I just want joy and I want peace and I want enthusiasm. So if that's true, then I have to be unconditionally okay with whatever happens today, whatever experience flows through here. I have to be unconditionally okay with it. And if I'm unconditionally okay with it, then you ultimately are going to play checkmate with life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how, you say, how do I want to feel? And, the thing is that we have to go first, as like we have to be the first to say, I don't want to feel like this. I want to choose joy. I
Yeah.
choose for myself. I choose empowerment, whatever it is, those higher vibrational feelings. And that's where the power really comes in. That's when we step into the fullness of who we are, live life from our authentic place, rather than just constantly reacting. So I'd
Yes.
encourage everyone to kind of reflect on that and think, in what ways can I go first today, right? In what ways can I go first in choosing how I want to feel?
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, it's about how you really want to use your mind, right? Do you want your mind to implement a thought that goes in there that causes you to get off of those emotions, or do you want to? We all know the difference between the thought that just shows up. You're perfectly fine, and all of a sudden the thought shows up, and you're not. Get weird. It gets weird in there, right? When things go well, it gets weird. When things go wrong, it gets really weird in there. You're the being experiencing the weirdness that it goes on there. And so I love how you paraphrase that of just saying that planting the questions so that you're in control and using that as the tool that the mind is, the wonderful tool, but using it instead of the mind generating thoughts and then putting them through your peripheral inside the mind's eye that you get attached to, because the mind is nothing but a thought generating machine. It's just bubbles coming up. The problem is when we electrify it and we glue ourselves to our thoughts, that's when we start making those irrational decisions, or the emotions just become us and we start responding from there. Whether you're fighting with your partner or fighting with somebody at work or whatever that is, you're not interacting with life the highest quality that you can. And that's where I think people get really caught.
Right, right. And I'm really understanding the power of thoughts too is really important in this journey too, is being aware of your thoughts and understanding and realizing that the universe will build on that, right? Whatever we put out there. So the
Yeah.
universe will, law of attraction, energy, I mean, it'll automatically stack onto whatever we put out there. So if we're putting negative thoughts out on there, it's going to be joined with other negative thoughts. So we have to become aware and ask ourselves the question, is this thought productive for the direction I'm trying to go? Is this thought in my highest good, et cetera? And literally, I mean, I find it's still, I mean, even where I am on my journey now, it's still a moment to moment practice. There is no like, I've got this certificate now, I've arrived. Like it's easy to think positively all the time. So, I mean, it's a constant moment to moment practice, but that's where the excitement is, right? It's exhilarating. It's fun. It's intellectually stimulating to constantly, fine tune our thoughts and craft them in a way that helps us craft our reality.
I think I love how you put that in really you can working with the energy of the thought itself. I think there's also the way of getting behind all of it, right? So that you literally there's thoughts and there's emotions, but there's a separation that can occur where you're literally behind all of it. And you're just actually experiencing, you're like, oh, there goes a thought, there goes emotion. It doesn't mean you don't experience any of it. You actually experience it fully. It's just that you're never having to actually work with the energy of a thought or the energy of an emotion, because it literally blows through you like the wind blows over a leaf. And then as soon as it's done blowing, it comes back. And it just keeps you really, really grounded to that. And so a lot of the kind of the work that I try to really put in my life at this stage is like, how do I get behind all of that? Right. So how do I just sink behind all of those? And then of course you get right in the middle of your day and everything's going and you're unconscious again for a few minutes and then you kind of bring that awareness back. But it's like, how do I sit seated behind all of that? So when the thoughts or the emotions kind of show up there, it's just an experience. Like you walk outside and you feel the breeze. And then as soon as the breeze stops blowing, you don't feel it anymore. And you're not like sitting there going, how come the breeze isn't blowing? How come I don't feel this anymore? Right. You're not creating a second or third or fourth or 10th thought based on the fact the breeze isn't blowing. You just allow it to continue to unfold and you're behind all of it.
Right. Yeah, I love how you said that. And yeah, and I use the term, like for my life, silent observer. I always say, just
Yeah.
remind
It's wonderful.
a silent observer, just observe your thoughts
Yes.
and don't be attached to them, right? Don't be so attached, just observe. And like you said, let them flow. And because, when we get too attached to things, that's when we suffer, right? But when we let it flow through us and like you said, the breeze, then that's when we can, again, get to that place of higher momentum and surrender and peace and all of that.
Yeah.
So where I'd like to go next is I just love what you've done with your empire, that personal growth is a foundation of what you do and what you believe in, and this whole idea of work-life integration.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about the importance of that, the importance. I think this is huge as we step into
Yeah.
this new paradigm of business, after this whole shift in consciousness after the pandemic, that's brought a lot of things to the surface. And I think businesses have a huge opportunity right now to retemplate
Yeah.
how they operate and how they approach virtually every aspect of their business to, the conversations that they have with employees, to the language that's used.
Yeah.
And we have a chance to step into a more progressive paradigm. So would love to hear you talk about the importance of taking a holistic approach and
Yeah.
integrating this whole idea of work and life and really caring for the entire individual.
Yeah. Well, thanks. There's a couple things I'll unpack there. Number one is the kind of work-life integration. I always think of it as like a better way of describing it is like work-life presence, which I kind of shared earlier, which is that way I look at. I think most people in business, whether you're an employer or an owner or a leader or manager, whatever you are, whatever title you are playing in the world, it's irrelevant. The thing is that you just want to play present. So what I mean by that is if you're showing up for work and you've got a 6-hour workday, right? Then for 6 hours, you be as present as possible, right? During work. If there's a break that's scheduled for 15 minutes in the middle there, be as present as possible playing in your break, right? Most people are straddling this two lines. This is why so many people are burnt out. I just taught a course down in Florida, or kind of a keynote thing about why burnout happens. And burnout isn't necessarily a amount of time people are actually spending on a job. It's the fact that there's never a break between what they're doing and so they're always kind of like one toe in business, one toe in personal, and there's never a separation. So really what it is like you may have a 13-hour day, but pray super present when you're in that 13-hour day. And then when you're not in that 13-hour work day, go focus 100% on playing present with just you, whether that's your partner or whatever that is. But most of us are caught in all these worlds now where we're trying to do everything all the time and we actually don't really do anything. I saw this survey come out the other day from Forbes that said that most people who are thinking they're working a 45-hour work week, when they track them, they're actually only working about 22 actual hours. And so that's kind of goes to that, is like people are saying, I need more work-life balance. And I go, well, you just need more work-life presence. Now, there is a tactical side that you may burn yourself out physically. That's different. That's different than you may need some time off from there, which is really important. But if you just woke up and said, okay, for 2 or 3 hours before I go to work, I'm going to be super present with just me. I'm going to be selfish. It's not a bad thing, right? You're going to be super selfish with my time so that I can contribute more to when I show up to whatever it is that I do, right? Instead of people getting up there and they're trying to do everything and they're distracted, they're trying to read their emails and do these things, just play present with where you are. If you're with your kids for an hour, play super present with them for an hour, right? If you're with your partner on a walk, be super present for that 15-minute walk, right? Whatever that is, just play as present as possible, and that will start to erode that burnout feeling or that stress feeling. And that's really where that kind of work-life presence can really play in people's lives. So then they actually get to experience all aspects of that.
Yeah, I love that. And that whole idea, yeah, that split energy, right? Where
Yeah,
we've got like one toe in each, dipped in each pond at the same time. I mean, that really is draining
it's
because
super
we're
draining.
not focused on one thing. We're not really enjoying anything. We're not experiencing the depth of each experience. And this is a lot of work that I do when I work with entrepreneurs and senior level executives who are under like massive pressure and
Yeah.
just pulled in a million different directions. And I say, like, whatever you're doing, just focus on it and make it the best possible experience that you can. Immerse
Yes.
yourself in it. If you're sitting drinking a cup of tea, soak that in, think about that. Think about, the taste and the texture and the temperature and get in this spirit of appreciation. When we choose appreciation, when we make that one of our unconditional feelings, that I am going to appreciate, I'm going to make and intentionally appreciate everything around me, then that helps us to stay present. I found, right? Appreciating the little things, right? Like this pad of paper that I ordered
Yeah.
from Amazon. Think about how many people were involved in this, in me getting this pad of paper on my table in front of me right now, right? I mean, so many people from, the forest, people working in the
Yeah.
foresters and, to create the pad of paper, to have it delivered and all of the logistics behind it. Like it really is quite mind boggling. And so when we look at the world through those lenses, then we really start to anchor on the present moment and realize that every single moment is a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah. And really people just start small. That's why we kind of share at our work. Like people come into our world and they're like, they haven't really been used to these conversations. And it's like, I don't know what anybody just said right there in a meeting, but like, it's just kind of start small. I think true personal growth is when something ceases to offend you in the old way. That's really kind of that personal growth, right? Where, you're driving down the road and all of a sudden, like, there's somebody driving 30 and a 45 and you drive for 5 minutes and you realize that you weren't even offended. Right? You realize all of a sudden, like, wow, this person's been driving for 10 minutes. I actually didn't get all weird inside. Isn't
Yeah.
that the real personal growth right there? Where it's like the things that no longer offend you in the old way, they cease to be able to control you. And so that's that true personal spiritual growth that people are looking for. So I think the ultimate freedom that people want, right? It's financial freedom, physical freedom, all those things are wonderful and they're great checkbox. But what people really, there's plenty of people that have financial freedom, they're miserable, right? And you know them, plenty of them. There's people that have physical freedom and they're still miserable. So that's not the end all solution. Really, the absolute freedom that people really want is to be able to walk through the world undisturbed, right? They want to be able to walk through the world and not have their stuff get hit. Right. And so then it's like, then it becomes this, well, what do I do every day? Which is use life as a way to highlight what's illuminated inside you that's causing you to get hit, and then work on releasing those components of it. They're called samskaras, if you will, right? So it's like, how do you work on releasing that stored energy so that you become a being that that walks through the world undisturbed? That's really what people are looking for.
I love that. The whole idea of, what listening to you talk, that it just the word peace came to mind. The word that's really that state of equanimity is what you're describing.
Yeah.
All is well, with heaven on earth. It's peaceful when you get to that place. My daughter was actually working on her vocabulary words over breakfast this morning. She's like, Mom, give me a word that starts with EQ quick. I'm like, okay, equanimity, take that
That's
class
awesome.
today. And that's what you described, though, getting to this place where you're just undisturbed. And so we talked about
Yes.
the concept. And, anytime that we, an emotional charge is elicited, that just highlights a part of us that's unhealed, a part of part of us that is
Yeah.
unconscious that needs to be made conscious. And then we can choose, again, we can intentionally choose unconditional feelings like peace. So when we're driving and somebody cuts us off in traffic, we can step
Yeah.
into those higher energies and say, this isn't about me. This
Yes.
is about what's going on for them in their world. And if someone else, is angry, how can I meet them with compassion and with empathy and try to step into their human experience for just a couple of moments and try to see this experience through different lenses, right? That's really where we've become incredibly empowered.
There's a line in the Gita that I really like, that kind of talks about like, what is the state of equanimity, or like, how do you know a great being? If you see one, and it says, in joy he's not overjoyed, in sorrow he's not oversorrowed, and he's in goodness he's when goodness comes he lets it come, and when it departs, and when sorrow comes he lets it come in and lets it depart when it parts. He's a sojourner in the midst of the qualities of nature, right? And it kind of wraps it up with that all of the oceans, all the streams and the rivers pour into the ocean, leaving the being unfound exactly how he was. Right. And it's kind of like so it's like, what does a great being look like or undisturbed? They actually look very ordinary. They end up hiding in the ordinary because they're that sojourner, just amidst the quality that just kind of walk through life undisturbed, and everything, like all the rivers pour into the ocean, but never leave it overflowing its bounds. All of the senses, all the emotions, all of the events of flowing into you, but never leaving you overflowed, which is just such a great way of kind of looking at it. Isn't it so cool to think though that like how like I think about like 15 years ago, like people didn't even talk like this. Like nobody even brought this up. Like and here we are just kind of having this cool conversation, and and people listening. I think it's just so remarkable that our culture, our world has evolved to embracing all of these type of conversations, because it's very difficult, right? And I just love the fact that people are bringing this every day to people.
I do too. Yeah, I love that. And I love the shift that we're seeing in consciousness. I think it's amazing the technology advances that have been made,
Yeah.
moments like this possible. A lot of my clients say, as I move further and further up, I feel like I'm starting to outgrow certain people, certain
Mm,
things, and leaving some things behind. And I'm worried that I'm going to be lonely. I'm worried that there aren't enough people up at
yeah.
the higher levels. And I said, you know, embrace the mindset of abundance. Like there's plenty of people. You just have to
Yeah.
have the belief that, what, I'm going to step into my authentic reality, whatever that is. And you have to trust that you're going to be greeted with other like-minded people who are also committed to growth. So
Yeah.
know that there are plenty of people out there, again, with this mindset, who are committed to bettering, to their own personal betterment, as well as the betterment of humanity.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
and I know we're a little bit over the time that I initially promised you that we'd wrap things up in, but the last question that I want to get into a little bit is, I'm curious, so how do you work with companies exactly? How do you work with others to help instill this whole sense of this whole commitment to growth within the organization? I realize every situation is different,
Yeah.
but can you just kind of give me the general framework?
Yeah. Well, yeah, number one, it starts with me, right? Is really showing up as that individual that I want everybody else to show up with, which is humility, servants, right? Of like, and I share a lot of things I do. Every time I get out of my truck before I come to my office, I always remind myself I'm not here to get anything from anybody. I'm here to contribute. And so I just always remind that to all of our leaders. And when I get on a call, it's like, hey, nobody's here to get anything from your employees. You're here to contribute to your employees. It's, if your phone's ringing, I'm pretty sure you can handle a phone call. You're spinning around the middle of the planet, right? It's just a phone call. You can handle it, right? And we do a lot of structural practice, but it's also just in an everyday conversation. We try to bring in that, hey, it looks like you're a little Velcro to that thought right now, right? What does that look like if you weren't, right? Or, and for me, if I, there's still plenty of times where I get Velcro to things. And once I realize I will in that meeting apologize and say, you know what, I was a little Velcroed there. I'm just going to pause for a second and let's just all take a minute and let's regroup. And then everyone comes back in there and then starts, yeah, I did too. Right. And so then it just breaks the energy, right? That's kind of this being built up, this tension that everyone can feel. It breaks it. Then you actually solve the problem that's in front of you. So I think it's number one is, how do I show up as a leader to our organization every single day? How much work am I doing on myself every single day? Which right now, every moment of life is work, but structurally, I spend about 6 hours a day on personal development. That's just kind of how I've structured my schedule for there. And I share that a lot with people and just encourage them to start at some place. And then as that takes hold, all of your leaders start adopting the same type of language. I mean, our culture is personal growth, right? People join an organization, they're like, I didn't know an organization like this existed, because everything we do embodies some level of personal growth. It doesn't mean we don't have goals. Doesn't mean you're not making money. Doesn't mean people have things. It just means while you're doing all of that, right? It's like, I always wrestled this whole thing of like business and spirituality, right? Which is, I love building business. I love being a visionary. I love creating. It's really the only thing I'm really good at, though. And so while I'm doing that, I don't really want to go sit in a cave to become spiritual, right? I actually want to become spiritual through my activities. And so it's just a lot of having this conversation, showcasing it, what it looks like. And then again, we have structural components to our teaching. On Monday mornings, there's an actual call that goes out to the organization. On Tuesdays, I do an hour-long call, and it's really a lot of it is 90% focused on personal growth. And the funny thing is our culture is built. I mean, people can go get money anywhere right now if you're an employee, right? They just can. People are getting paid more than ever. And one of the things I think our organization's done really good at is, what people can't get is this conversation. They can't get this level of personal growth from an organization that's going to deliver it, right? And so that's what I think that glue is, our culture that holds people together to our organization.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I absolutely love what you do. And I just think it is just so important on so many levels. So
You too.
congratulations to you on all of your successes, and look forward to staying in touch with you. If people would like to get in touch with you directly, what is the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I mean, you can go to adamhergenrother.com, and from there, it's a list of all of our stuff, our podcast, our trainings, any of the things, all the open positions we have right now, by the way, as we're growing. So if you're interested in joining an organization, you don't think they exist, certainly go see what opportunities are there. And we'd love to see a resume come in.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you. I so appreciate you being on my show this morning. This was just so valuable on so many levels. And I know so many people are going to walk away with a newfound awareness, ideas for what they could do differently in their own personal lives, their organizations, etc. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your day and being here with me today to talk all things personal growth. So,
Well, thank you. And again, I appreciate what you do, and for getting this message out. It's welcomed in our world. So thank you.
thank you. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. We appreciate you and are grateful that you've carved time out of your day to be here and listen to everything that Adam has had to share. Thanks, everyone, and have an amazing day. Bye.